Admiral Garrett leaned back in his leather chair, smirking as the war room fell silent, and asked the question he thought would put the young woman in her place. "So, Captain, just for fun, what's your kill count?" Never expecting that the number she whispered would drain every drop of color from his face and force him to his feet in disbelief. She stood there, Captain Elena Voss, barely 30 years old, dirt still under her fingernails from the battlefield she'd left just hours before, her uniform wrinkled and stained with smoke, while 15 decorated officers stared at her like she was a specimen under glass, and Garrett's question hung in the air like poison, because everyone in that room knew what he was really asking. He wasn't asking about enemy combatants. He was asking if this girl, this woman who'd been promoted over men twice her age, actually deserved to stand among them. The whispers had followed her for months. She's too young, too soft, too emotional. She only got the position because of politics, because of quotas, because the brass wanted good optics. And Garrett had made it his personal mission to prove she didn't belong, undermining her orders, questioning her strategies in front of subordinates, making jokes about Captain Kindergarten when he thought she couldn't hear. But she heard everything. She always heard everything. And she'd swallowed it all down like broken glass because she knew that one wrong move, one emotional outburst would prove every single one of them right. But this morning had been different. The emergency call had come at dawn, hostile forces breaching the northern perimeter, civilian evacuation incomplete, 3 battalions cut off and surrounded. And when the senior commanders froze, arguing about protocols and political ramifications and acceptable losses, Elena had simply stood up, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "I'm going in, with or without authorization." And she'd walked out of that room before anyone could stop her. She took 12 soldiers, just 12, because that's all who volunteered to follow the crazy captain into what everyone else called a suicide mission. And they'd moved through enemy territory like shadows, while back in the war room, Garrett had actually laughed, actually told the other officers that they'd just solved their little problem because Captain Kindergarten wouldn't be coming back, and maybe now they could get someone competent in that position. Except she did come back. 6 hours later, uniform shredded, blood on her face that wasn't all hers, carrying a wounded soldier on her back. And behind her came the 3 battalions, all 743 soldiers accounted for, followed by 216 civilians who would have been slaughtered if she'd waited for authorization, if she'd followed protocol, if she'd been the coward Garrett believed she was. And now she stood in this war room, exhausted beyond measure, while Garrett asked his mocking question about kill counts, and the room held its breath because everyone understood this was the moment. This was where she would either break or prove she never should have been doubted in the first place. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her eyes made him shift in his seat, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of that room like thunder. 4. Garrett's smirk widened. He glanced at the other officers with that told-you-so expression, already opening his mouth to make another joke, but she wasn't finished. 4 enemy combatants I killed personally, she continued, her voice growing stronger. But since you asked about my count, Admiral, let me give you the full picture. I prevented 1,043 deaths today. I saved 743 soldiers who High Command had already written off as acceptable losses. I evacuated 216 civilians, including 74 children from a hot zone, while you sat in this climate-controlled room debating optics, and I did it with 12 volunteers because not a single one of you had the courage to authorize the mission or the integrity to come with me. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet, and Garrett's face went from smug to pale to red as she took a step closer to his desk. You want to talk about numbers, Admiral? Let's talk about numbers. In the 8 months since you started undermining my command, I've led 47 operations. I haven't lost a single soldier under my direct command, not one, and I've completed every mission objective while maintaining a 0 civilian casualty rate. So when you ask about my kill count like it's some kind of game, like we're comparing scores at a shooting range, you're asking the wrong question, because I didn't join this military to see how many people I could kill. I joined to see how many I could save. She pulled a blood-stained notebook from her pocket and dropped it on his desk with a thud that echoed like a gavel. Those are the names.
every single soldier and civilian who's alive right now because I did my job. And if you spent half as much energy supporting your officers as you do trying to humiliate them, maybe your kill count would matter less than your save count. Maybe you'd remember that we're supposed to be the good guys, and maybe, just maybe, you deserve that chair you're sitting in. Admiral Garrett sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, while every other officer in that room stared at Elena with something between shock and awe, and the base commander, a gray-haired general who'd been silent until now, stood up slowly and began to clap, just a slow, deliberate applause that built until every officer in that room was standing except Garrett, and Elena simply nodded once, picked up her notebook, and walked out with her head high, leaving behind a war room that would never doubt her again, and an admiral who'd finally learned that true strength isn't measured in who you destroy, it's measured in who you save.